Like, we're in a dark ages of flight and nobody knows it.
For decades, we were promised a future where flying halfway around the world would be as fast as making dinner. And for a moment, we had it. This is the Concorde, a supersonic jet that could fly from New York to London in under 3.5 hours. But despite its blistering speed, it was grounded in 2003. Too loud, too expensive, too unsustainable. But what if supersonic flight didn't have to be a relic of the past? I traveled to Colorado to meet the man who believes it's not only possible, it's inevitable. His name is Blake Scholl, and one day this former internet guy crunched the numbers and realized something shocking. With the right design and a bit of clever software, supersonic flight without the sonic boom might actually work. And now, thanks to a recent executive order to repeal that ban, this dream is closer to takeoff than ever before.
For those who haven't followed Boom Supersonic closely, tell us about your vision and why now is the right time for the return of supersonic travel.
Yeah, so our goal is to really pick up where Concorde left off and to bring back supersonic travel and ultimately make it available for everyone from the president on down to families. And why now is kind of a funny question, because the right answer would have been why it was the 1970s the right time. My view is we lost our way in a pretty big way in how we do aerospace development in the 60s. And we had Concorde and Apollo, both 1969.
So weird.
Right, it's super weird. And now it's 2025, can't go to the moon, can't fly supersonic. I mean, imagine if everybody took away our iPhones and gave us back a UNIVAC. Yet that's what we've actually had in aerospace. In many ways, Elon paved the way, showing that somebody who had no background in aerospace, who'd been an internet guy, could go start a company from scratch and put stuff in orbit. And that was a big part of what gave me the courage to go try this.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. There would be no boom if it weren't for SpaceX. I would not have considered it within the realm of possibility. But I think we are, today finally in a place where the volume of, I'll just call it high-end global travel, meaning people flying first in business class, paying top dollar for those flatbeds. That's the initial market for supersonic. That's big enough at the same time that we've got the technology ready to do it without requiring a regulatory change. So Boom was able to start because we could tell from the math, from the physics, that we could build a supersonic jet, affordable at business class prices, able to fly on hundreds of routes around the world without needing anything fundamentally new technology-wise, and anything fundamentally new regulatory-wise. So we weren't even planning to solve sonic boom on day one.
Wow.
In other words, Boom wasn't waiting on a scientific miracle or a change in the law. They were building a jet that could work within the existing rules, flying supersonic over oceans, where sonic booms aren't a legal issue, and where most long-haul flights already take place. But as their design matured and the software improved, something surprising emerged. Under the right conditions, it might be possible to fly supersonic without the boom ever reaching the ground. That changed everything. Because if you can eliminate the sonic boom, you can unlock not just transoceanic speed, but global point-to-point travel, supersonic over land, and that's the holy grail. And that boomless flight was proved with the XB-1.
So this is a 12% scale model of the XB-1. This was actually flown in August of 2018 at the San Diego low-speed wind tunnel.
So this is the cockpit of the XB-1, compared to the fighter jets that our test pilots are used to flying. They tell me this is actually quite spacious.
Oh, wow.
So if you imagine yourself in here looking this way, you don't have a lot of forward visibility. And when you come in for landing, the nose is actually very high. So you're not able to see the runway. And so we have what I think is really one of the first practical applications of augmented reality, which is this pilot's main display here goes into AR mode. And so you press a little toggle, I think it's this button right here, and the screen flips over and it's driven by a camera view on the nose gear. So you can see sort of a virtual window through the nose. You can see the runway and you land on the screen.
Wow. That's crazy. I just flew on a double-decker for the first time, and I noticed that they had like a POV on top of the plane.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I was like, what? Like every plane should have this. This is crazy.
Yeah, we'll have that in Overture too.
Wow.
And Overture is what you would be flying in and possibly as soon as 2029. Overture is the supersonic airliner that will carry up to 80 passengers, flying twice the speed of today's airliners, and it will fly above other commercial aircraft at an altitude of up to 60,000 feet, high enough to see the curvature of the Earth below.
Oh my gosh, I'm guessing you've sat in this, right?
Once.
And is it comfortable?
I think that was the last thing I was thinking about when I was in there. It was
Right.
I didn't get in until after the last flight. So I didn't, one of our safety rules is you don't go anywhere and do anything unless you've got a reason to be doing it. And so I didn't want to be the CEO that got in the airplane and broke it.
Yeah, for
or,
sure.
or worse, broke it without realizing I broke it.
Yeah.
Everything that's painted white is a carbon fiber composite. So that's not just strong and lightweight. It really enables the very sleek shape of the airplane. So if you look all over the jet, there's no straight line anywhere on the airplane, right? Everything is a very fluid, curved surface, and those are the sort of optimal aerodynamic shapes that we're able to determine through a lot of iterative computer simulation. So then we actually build it out of composites. XB1 was originally designed to go 10% faster than Concorde. And we chose an aggressive speed target because we wanted to learn where the real world challenges were in actually achieving that speed. And because of those learnings, we backed off a little bit on Overture. We got way more pragmatic. But that drove XB1 to this very long, slender shape, these really narrow wings. And it was so that we've got over 60 feet tip to tail, but the wingspan is just about 21 feet. It's a very slender wing. In fact, like the little single-engine propeller plane that I fly has about the same wingspan as XB1.
Wow.
But Overture is very different. So Overture is over 200 feet long, and it's a 100-foot wingspan. And that increased wingspan is practical if you back off on top speed by a little bit, and then it makes a lot of other things much easier to achieve. So one of the arts of supersonic airplane design is that it's really two airplanes in one. It's got to be able to fly supersonic, but it's also got to be able to fly for takeoff and landing. And the physics in those two modes are completely different. So you need to have one airplane that can do fast very efficiently, and it can take off and land very safely. And so if we look forward to the nose of the airplane, why don't we walk over there?
Yeah.
From a distance, you think it's just a perfect cone, but it's not. And by the way, now that it's flown, you can touch it. So feel free to put your hands on it.
I was going to say, she's retired, right?
She's very sadly, she's retired.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can really feel the kind of the crinkle and the edge there. And this is something that we call a vortex control nose. And that particular shape, because of how it comes not quite to a point, but to a much tighter radius, results in very predictable vortex formation, which prevents what was a whole bunch of stability and control problems at low speed that we had with kind of simpler designs. We spent 2 years working out that shape. And that's why we did XB1. We wanted to learn those lessons on a small airplane before we scaled up to Overture. Sometimes people look at XB1, they look at Overture, and they say these two airplanes don't look alike.
Yeah.
What was the point of your prototype?
Right.
And what I say is, if my production airplane looked just like my prototype, I didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
Right? We did this to learn. And so, it's easy to look at this airplane, not having worked on it, and think, wow, what a beautiful jet. I look at it and I see all the things we would do differently.
Right.
I see all the lessons learned. By the way, the next thing we're going to see, kind of cool pictures of coming out of Boom, is engine development. And so we did the airplane first, and then we're scaling up the engine, and then we're scaling up the rest of the jet. And so under construction now is our very first custom jet engine prototype.
Oh, wow.
And that's going to look, that development program will be a lot more like what you've seen at SpaceX on the Starship program, where we're vertically integrating a lot of the manufacturing. We're going to build them, we're going to break them. And by the time we break one, the next one's going to be half built.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot of iterative design on engines. And my goal is after a few iterations, we end up to something that's the jet engine equivalent of a Raptor 3. I think a mistake we make in aviation is we get to the Raptor V1 stage, we take it through regulatory certification, and then we say, oh, that was painful, I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
And then it sits around for 50 years. And so one of the big things we're doing at Boom is leveraging software and AI to speed up the a lot of the engineering processes and a lot of the certification processes.
Oh, wow.
Turns out AI is great at filling out paperwork.
Yeah.
And so our approach is much more iterative all the way through. And so we're going to be willing to ship products, certify them, throw them out, do it again, because that's how you actually get to something really amazing.
So this is a scale model of the Overture airliner, and the actual airliner will be 125 times the size of this. It's going to be big. And you may recognize this from a photo with President Trump in the Oval Office holding this on Valentine's Day, just months before that supersonic ban would be lifted. So you'll notice United on the livery here, and that is not by accident. United, as well as 2 other customers, have already committed to ordering Overture airliners. In fact, United already has 15 on order. I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Delete Me. I've been working with Delete Me for a year and a half, and I highly encourage you to consider using their service to keep your information safe. You know, things like your phone number and your address. Do a quick Google search of your name and you may be surprised to see your personal data on the internet getting gathered up by countless data brokers, putting you at increased risk of identity theft, online harassment, even spam and robocalls. So what can you do? Hire a service like Delete Me. Delete Me saves you time while helping reduce the risk of your data getting into the wrong hands by removing your data from hundreds of data broker websites. And Delete Me actively monitors data broker websites, making sure that your personal info stays removed. I personally feel so much better knowing that Delete Me is helping me stay safe from harassment, identity theft, and even stalking. For 20% off all US consumer plans, just follow the link in the video description. Thanks again to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. What does the world look like if Boom continues to succeed?
I think one of the easiest ways to get clear on this is to think about how different the world would be if flights were twice as long as they are today, which was what it was, in the 1950s. Like, imagine it took 12 hours to fly coast to coast in the US. Think how infrequently we would actually do it. Think about who we could be friends with. Think about who we could vacation with. Think about where we would do business. And that, for me, I find that imagining that much worse world of travel helps me see that we're actually living in a really terrible world of travel today. Like, we're in a dark ages of flight and nobody knows it. Going from, like, say, here to Tokyo is 12 or 13 hours.
Oh, I've done it twice.
Right? My condolences.
Yeah.
And it's awful. Like, you leave here midday Saturday, you get there end of day Sunday, Tokyo time, try to sleep in a hotel room, right? You've done this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Next morning, the alarm goes off, try to go to a meeting, try to be awake in the meeting. And then I've done this a couple times where I went for one meeting.
Wow.
One meeting, and it was worth it. Go over one meeting, turn around, come right back. Takes 3 days,
my God.
and I can't do anything the rest of the week because I'm so screwed up from the jet lag, right?
Totally.
Right? And so what Supersonic will do is, let's say from San Francisco, and let's say you're leaving San Francisco, you have a Monday morning meeting in Tokyo. Instead of leaving midday Saturday, you sleep at home, and you leave Sunday morning. An 8 a.m. Sunday morning departure arrives in Tokyo 8 a.m. Monday morning, 6 hours later. So to us in San Francisco, it's early afternoon. In Tokyo, it's Monday morning. They're awake, we're awake. We can do a whole day of meetings, turn around, come back overnight, and we're back in the US 24 hours after we left with no jet lag because we didn't change time zones.
Wow.
Right? So it's not a couple hours better. It's not like, oh, Wi-Fi makes up for this or Starlink makes up for flights being long. Although that will be great. It will actually be great. This is 2 whole calendar days back, plus all the wear and tear of time zone changing.
Oh yeah, no, it has a drastic effect on your mental well-being.
Oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
I'll be one of your first customers.
I'll try not to screw it up too badly.
Well, let's talk about the news from last week. Big news, the reason that I flew here.
President Trump signed an executive order saying, FAA, it's time to change. Delete that speed limit, put a commonplace noise limit in place instead. And and FAA needs to actually go do that work.
Okay.
But now it's like pretty inevitable that it's going to happen. And I think this is a turning point in aviation history.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to overstate. Like the speed limit that went in place in 1973, I think was really a turning point in what ultimately led to the destruction of Boeing that we've seen. So let me unpack that. From the Wright brothers forward to the first jets, every generation of passenger airplane was faster and better. And then what happened in 1973, and we can talk about why, but we put a cap on speed. We said, thou shalt not exceed Mach 1. So that entire trajectory of innovation was suddenly flatlined, and speed was no longer an option. And so if you look at today's latest Boeing airliners, and you put them next to the 1960s designs, you kind of have to know a lot about airplanes to really point out what's different. Yeah. It hasn't really changed, and speeds haven't changed. And this, I think this affects where smart, talented, driven young people want to work. Like I grew up loving airplanes since I was, as long as I can remember, but it never occurred to me to have a career in aerospace because I wanted to go where new things were happening. Yeah. So I fell in love with the internet and computers, and I got a computer science degree, and I went to Amazon as my first job, back when my family thought it was a bookstore. And so I think there's an entire generation of talent that didn't go into aerospace because the innovation that was possible was so constrained. And the speed limit's not the entire story there, but I do think it's an important part of the story. And so then what we end up with is this world where, like we've all read the same tragic headlines. Boeing hasn't shipped an all-new airplane in 20 years. 20 years. Can you imagine like Apple going 20 years without like a new iPhone?
No.
Like if they go 24 months without a new design, it's like, oh, Apple can't innovate, right? But it's been 21 years was the last time either Boeing or Airbus launched an all-new airliner. 21 years. And what we've seen since then is all they've done is tweaked products, and they've been famous failures. So I think where we are now with the speed limit getting unlocked is today Boom is the only company building a supersonic jet. We're the only ones, which is like head explode emoji. It's like insane. Yeah, it is. And I think that will change. I think we're going to see more competition. And although I very much want to see Boom as the winning team here, the thing that helps me sleep better at night this week is I think it's now inevitable. We removed the regulatory roadblock. Sure. There is no such thing as a sound barrier, really. There was a regulatory barrier, and that's gone. And even if we screw this up, I think somebody else will get it done.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to try and not screw it up.
Yeah. Wow, you're off to a great start.
It's it's been 11 years since I started, and we've come a distance.
Wow.
I feel very lucky to get to do this, and one of my wishes for really everybody is to find something to work on that it's worth throwing yourself into completely. That's worth spending a decade of your life on. Boomless cruise is a way to fly a supersonic airplane such that no boom gets to the ground. And the most surprising thing is it's actually a software innovation based on well-known physics. And the physics are the physics of refraction. So if we go back to middle school science class, remember that experiment where there's a glass of water and you drop a pencil in the glass and it looks broken. Why is it broken? It's because light refracts when it goes into the water. And what does that really mean? What it means is when any wave goes through something where the speed of that wave changes, the wave actually turns. So imagine like you're driving your car and the outside wheels are going faster than the inside wheels. It's going to cause a turn towards the inside. So that's what refraction is. Any wave does this. Well, sound waves are waves, right? Sonic booms are sound waves. And it turns out the speed of sound is not the same everywhere. The speed of sound varies with temperature. So up high, where it's cold, the speed of sound is low, relative to what it is at ground level, where the speed of sound is high. So the boom comes off the airplane. If you fly at the right speed, you make it come off at a shallow angle. It's coming down towards the ground, but it's curling, it's refracting towards where the speed of sound is lower, so it's turning upwards. And so you end up with basically this curling upward. And the way it curls is dependent on winds and temperatures, so having some weather data feeds a computer model. And the computer model says, it's given your altitude and given today's weather, here is the fastest you can fly such that the bottom of that U doesn't touch the ground.
Wow.
That's it. And by the way, a thing that a lot of people have not remarked upon, because NASA has trained everybody that to get a acceptable sonic boom level, you have to redesign the airplane. And a thing that a lot of people have overlooked, when we did our first supersonic flight, XB-1 was flying in formation with 2 other airplanes. None of them made a boom. Why? Because they were all flying in boomless cruise. It's about speed and altitude relative to the atmosphere.
Oh my gosh, that's really crazy.
Right?
You said it was called XB-59. I've heard about NASA's
The X-59. Yeah.
X-59, like what's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not on the inside of it, obviously, but I think what happened there was they were looking for a way to demonstrate that you could make a sonic boom that was quiet enough that it would be acceptable. And so they're doing a lot of pretty complicated things to kind of stretch the airplane out, which kind of stretches the boom out, so when you hear it, it's not as loud. And but it leads to a very difficult to build airplane. I think that's part of why I think we're like $1 billion into it. It hasn't flown yet.
Take that $1 billion and put it in the boom.
I could do a lot with $1 billion. But I think part of what happened is they made the job maybe harder than it needed to be.
Right.
And now the quiet boom approach can scale to higher speeds than boomless. So the X-59 I think is targeted for 1.4 Mach versus boomless works up to about 1.3. So it can go a little bit faster. But you'll hear a boom and hopefully the boom isn't so loud that it's bothersome. But I think it's more complicated than it needs to be. The other thing that happens is there's the inverse square law, which says the intensity of any wave drops off with the square of distance. So what does that mean? Imagine there's a boat making a wake on a lake. Obviously, the bigger the boat, the bigger the wake.
Right.
But also, the further away the boat, the less you feel the wake. So if you double the distance to the boat, the wake actually gets a quarter as strong. So as you climb up in altitude, the boom intensity comes down. And I don't think anyone's done some really high quality psychoacoustics on this. We'll need to go do it. But when you're up at 60,000 feet or maybe more with a not super huge airplane, how strong is that wake when it reaches the ground, and is it really a problem? I think that's a question that nobody really knows the answer to. But it might be that sonic boom isn't nearly as big of a problem as people have claimed.
So what were the main barriers to get that ban lifted or to have that executive order issued, and how did Boom and yourself obviously play a role in influencing or preparing for that change?
I think the surprising thing is how easy it was.
Okay.
People have talked about sonic boom for 50 years and treated it as this boogeyman that is really difficult to solve. And you see projects like the NASA X-59, that's NASA's attempt to build an airplane with a quieter sonic boom.
Right.
It's really difficult. That thing has consumed $1 billion of taxpayer money, hasn't flown yet. It turns out, at least to a first order, the solve for sonic boom is software. So this airplane can fly boomless, but there's no physical feature on the airplane that enables it. It's about how it flies. So it turns out if you fly at the right speed for the current weather conditions, and this works up to about Mach 1.3, so about 50% faster than the 737, and then after that it doesn't work. So we can talk about how you go faster than that. But up to about Mach 1.3, you can get the boom to make a U-turn in the atmosphere and never touch the ground. And so there is a boom, but no one's there to hear it because it doesn't touch the ground. By the way, we didn't invent these physics. People have known about these physics for decades. It's been talked about. In essence, any supersonic jet that can hold that speed at that altitude can do it. It's not unique to our airplane. It's really about calculating the right speed for the day. And it's computers and a little bit of weather data is all you really need. And so people kind of knew about this. Nobody did anything with it. And there was not a lot of appetite to go do a regulatory change for something that nobody had ever proven you could really do in practice. And so then we went and did it 6 times. With that demonstration, it got everyone to the point of oh, this isn't theoretical. We should go get out of the way. We should go fix the rules. And so it surprised me, like just really how quickly this could happen. So we announced Boomless Cruise on February 10th. I flew to DC that night on a horrible overnight flight that should be supersonic. And by the time I landed, I had an invitation to the White House, and we sort of started talking to people about maybe we should allow this. And Elon was kind enough to endorse it on Twitter. About a month ago, there was a bipartisan bill introduced in both the House and the Senate that does this. And then last week, the president signed an executive order, and we encountered like basically no opposition. But it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for having shown with a real flying airplane with a person on board that we could do it.
Right, so this happened in January, and then February you were already off to the races, going to the White House, and then last week, here we are.
Right. I mean, to me, like, I don't know, I want everything to be faster, and parts of me felt like that was slow, but everyone who's ever like worked on changing a rule tells me this was incredibly fast.
Yes.
And so it was like 52 years and then a couple months.
Will we realistically see supersonic flights over U.S. land in the next few years, or are we still years away despite the policy shift?
I think the airplane development will be the long pole in the tent, not the regulation. The regulation is going to change very quickly, and we're running as fast as we can to get the airplanes ready. So our goal is to be ready to carry passengers by the end of 29. What's behind us here is the XB-1. And so what this is a supersonic jet made out of airliner technology, but scaled down for a proof of concept. And so we're taking everything we've learned from XB-1 and the basic technology behind it, and scaling up and building a passenger jet we call Overture. And as we speak, we just finished finalizing the Overture design. So we took everything we learned from this bird, we said, let's update, we're done. And next year we start building the first Overture, and our goal is to roll it out in 27, fly it in 28, and be ready to carry passengers by the end of 29.
Wow. Why did you chose the name Overture?
I think we had some people help us with name ideas.
I love it.
Yeah, I love the name too. It's funny how naming goes. I think we had a half a dozen names that were proposed, and nobody in the team agreed what order to put them in, except everybody agreed Overture was the best. So Overture it is, and it fell off very quickly after that. Let's
talk about Overture. What are the key technological innovations that make it different from Concorde and Viable today?
Yeah, so we're really leveraging 50 years of progress in how we design and build airplanes. Concorde was an aluminum aircraft with 4 converted military afterburning engines, with a mechanical droop nose so the pilots could see the runway. And it's really designed with slide rules, drafting paper. Like, it's really remarkable technologically what that airplane did. Very impressive for the for 1960s. And yet since then we haven't changed speed, but we changed how we build airplanes. And so we're taking really proven 787 level technology, which means software-defined aerodynamics, carbon fiber composite aerostructures, turbofan engines, fly-by-wire flight controls. We're taking all that sort of basic building blocks of airplanes, shrinking the airplane down, making it long and skinny, and putting twice as many engines. And so what that means is an airplane that's 20% more aerodynamically efficient than Concorde, 20% more engine efficiency than Concorde. And all that means you can have more range, you can have less fuel burn, you can have lower per seat costs, you can connect more cities, you can make the seats bigger and more comfortable. And the airplane can be quieter for everybody it flies over.
This might not be affordable for everyone at first, so let's talk about when will this become affordable to the average person, or is it likely to remain premium for a while?
I think the end goal is to make this available for anybody who really values their time. And so think of it as, if you can afford an iPhone, I want you to be able to afford a supersonic ticket. Now that won't be day one. Day one is all business class.
Yeah.
And so that's about 20% of passengers. It is about 80% of international airline profits. So it's a smart place to start. That's why the wine lists and lounges and whatnot are very fancy, because most of the money is the front of the airplane.
Yep.
So we're starting with that, and you can think of it, for those of you who know the Tesla story, you can think of it as this is like the Model S of supersonic jets. This is the Roadster. The Model S comes next, and we're going to take everything we learned from that, and we're going to build the equivalent of the Model 3. So the price comes down for a lot more people. That said, I don't think we're ever going to do a bargain basement supersonic jet. One of my laments in the way the air travel system has evolved, it's been kind of a race to the bottom in economy.
Yeah.
And we end up with these experiences that are just miserable. And I don't want supersonic to ever stoop that low.
Right.
I think we can build something that it will cost a little bit more, but it'll be worth it because you're going to save the time and it's going to be better on board.
Yeah, no, that's good. You got to keep your standards.
That's right. I'm reminded of back in the day before Steve Jobs launched the iPad.
Yeah.
He talked about where Apple was in product positioning and how they didn't actually charge more for a Mac than a PC, but they didn't make the cheap Macs. They only made the nice Macs.
Right, right.
And I think there's an analogy to what we'll do here. Like we'll get the price point down, but we won't make the cheap one. We'll only make the nice ones.
Right. Hey, I like it. So what do you say to, I'm sure that there are some skeptics still, maybe. What would you say are like some of the common myths about supersonic and, or some of the things that you're challenged with? And
well, let's start with what a skeptic said 10 years ago. 10 years ago, a startup couldn't build a supersonic jet. Only a government or military could do that. Well,
we've heard
there it is.
With rockets.
Right? Yeah, familiar. The skeptics don't learn.
Yeah.
At least many of them don't.
Well, they don't try.
Yeah, so can't build a supersonic jet as a startup. Well, we did that. Airlines would never order a supersonic jet, let alone from a startup. Well, United did, American did, Japan Airlines did. In fact, United and American put money down. So that turned out not to be true. Can't solve sonic boom. Actually, it was way easier than anybody said. So those things turned out not to be true. So what are the challenges now? Our Overture airliner needs a custom jet engine. And like SpaceX, we're building our own engines. And people call us crazy for that. I think the reality is any other way is crazy. Like, can you imagine SpaceX had Elon gone to, I don't know, Aerojet and said, would you make me a rocket engine? He certainly wouldn't have the Raptor, let alone the Raptor 3. They probably would have studied it for 5 years and said, maybe we'll let you buy an old space shuttle engine.
Yep. Right?
That's the boat that ULA is in. So SpaceX wouldn't exist if they hadn't figured out how to do their own engines. And I think the same story will be true of Boom. Overture will exist only because we decided to do our own engines. And then there's a lot of complex engineering, not just in the engine, but in the airplane. The expectations for safety of airplanes are very, very high. And the world's proven that it's possible. In the last 15 years of commercial aviation, I think we've had one fatal accident on a US airline. Sadly, it was this year, but very nearly a perfect safety record. And yes, there's no such thing as an acceptable crash, but we've made it very, very safe. And that's the product of a whole lot of design knowledge, incredibly detailed engineering, and intricate testing. And we have to go through all of that, and we're going to hold ourselves to at least the same standards that you would expect out of a Boeing or Airbus. When I started the company 11 years ago, I thought, well, if you can start a company, build a rocket, put something in space, then surely you could be able to build a supersonic jet. The rocket sounds harder. And I think it's actually, in many ways, that actually turned out not to be true, because SpaceX had the benefit of the first few launches, actually the first many launches, had nobody on board. And so in the first Falcon 1 launches, they blew up. And it was annoying, but nobody got hurt.
Yeah. And
the very first flight of XB-1 had a human on board. And the very first flight of Overture is going to have several people on board. And it's there to carry 60-odd people at a time. So the fact that the product is safety critical from day one makes it much harder to engineer.
Tell me about how you selected the pilot for this first.
Well, we had a line out the door.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, because everybody wanted to be the second coming of Chuck Yeager, right? I think history remembers test pilots.
Yeah.
And it took me a little while to appreciate Why? And I think it's because everyone else is invested in the program, but only the test pilot's invested with his life. We talked to a number of mostly former military test pilots, and we wanted people who had done a lot of test flying in high-performance airplanes. And ironically, test pilots don't look like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. I mean, they do physically. They're badass humans. But they are, there's a saying, there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. And it's, and test pilots are pretty bold, but the really good ones understand everything about the airplane.
Yeah. And
they're along with the engineers as it gets designed. They're along with the technicians as they build it. They know the thing inside and out. And they are incredibly methodical about what they do.
I still want to know, like, what you had such a shift from your previous career. Like, what was the initial thought that was like, hey, I should try this?
Yeah, well, I thought I probably shouldn't. So I'll tell a little bit of my backstory that contextualizes this.
Yeah.
My first, so I spent 5 years at Amazon as a software engineer. I got to work on some pretty cool stuff as part of a mobile apps company. And then I started my own company that was building I can't say this with a straight face, we made a barcode scanning game. And this was like 2010. And I figured I knew e-commerce from my time at Amazon. I knew mobile from my time working at this other apps company. And so I should work on mobile e-commerce. And I wake up one day and we're building this barcode scanning game for people who shop in stores. And I'm like, what am I doing?
What's the game?
You don't want to know.
Okay.
It was really bad.
Does it still exist?
No. We shut it down a long time. It never deserved to exist. It died a very appropriate death. But I would get up in the morning and we had all the normal startup problems. And yet I look at what we're building and I was like, why? And so we had a chance to sell the company to Groupon, and I took it because it was like, oh, my escape fantasy just got realized. The investors get their money back, and I get to not have all the pressure of like not being afraid I'd lose everyone's money. And then I go to work every day, and now I'm working on internet coupons. So I've gone from barcode scanning game one level up to internet coupon.
Yeah.
And what I learned about myself was I loved being a founder. I loved building. And when I was doing that, I would give it my all, and I'd run at my personal red line. But that I wanted to work on something that would make that worthwhile. And so I remember Eric Schmidt, who I think at the time was still the chairman of Google, had a quote that was something like, and this is the kind of Google's original mission was to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible, which they've kind of done, right? But boy, in the early days, imagine if they had that mission versus let's go make a better search engine. One of those is inspiring.
Right.
The other one is not. And the harder mission is more inspiring. And Eric basically said, harder is easier because the more audacious mission attracts better people. And what that made me realize was I wanted to work on the thing that was most motivating to me personally. And so I thought, okay, let me make a list of all my ideas in descending order of how happy I would be if it worked. And for me, anything with an airplane in it goes to the top of the list. And I had sort of set a goal of flying supersonic in my mid-20s. I put a Google alert on supersonic jet. I figured someone will do this. I just want to know when I can buy a ticket. And for a better part of a decade, no one was doing anything. So I thought, okay, there's probably a good reason it's a bad idea. There's probably a good reason Boeing and Airbus aren't doing it. Nobody else is doing it. But let me just dig in. I want to know for myself, because I never want to be 80 and think like, what had happened if I'd had the courage to look at that supersonic thing?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'll get 2 weeks into the research, and then I'll know why it's a bad idea, and I'll move on. But instead, what I found is basically every single thing written on the internet about why supersonic flight wasn't happening was easily provable false. And like one of the common patterns was people giving qualitative answers to quantitative questions. Like, oh, if you don't solve sonic boom and you can't fly supersonic over land, which is really, really hard, you won't have a market big enough for your airplane and it won't be worth building. Okay, sounds plausible, but like, hang on, isn't there a question of numbers here? What if you did Concorde 2.0, and you flew supersonic over water, subsonic over land, but you got the cost down. How big, would that be possible? How big would the market be? And so what I started to find is, like, when I started putting numbers against these things, the claims that were out there didn't add up. The basic idea was, let's start with business class. Let's give people a supersonic seat for the economics of a flatbed in business class. How much do I need to beat Concorde by in order to make that happen? And mind you, this is 2014. The only aviation credential I have is a pilot's license, but I do have a spreadsheet and a web browser. And answering that question is a 3-line spreadsheet, and the data you need to fill it out is all in Wikipedia. And the answer was something like 10%. I was like, wait a minute. You're saying that we could have a supersonic renaissance if we can beat 1960s technology by 10%? I was like, okay, well, I don't know anything. So how much better was the 787 versus the 777? How did it compare to the 767? And I was like, oh, every generation of airplanes is like 15, 20% better.
Yeah.
We can't find 10%? I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe supersonic's different. But it didn't sound implausible. And then so at that point, I kind of went to school. I went back and took remedial calculus and physics. I bought every textbook I could find. I took an airplane design class.
Oh my gosh.
And I spent about a year just like trying to turn myself into an aerospace engineer.
Wow. I feel like there's so many parallels between your story and Elon's story.
I mean, I was very inspired by what Elon had done. And I remember one of the things I did very early on when I was trying to figure this out is I went and found some early SpaceX people.
Yeah.
I remember I flew down to Tucson and I met with Jim Cantrell.
Oh, wow.
And Jim had helped Elon start SpaceX.
Yeah.
And I said, Jim, here's what I'm thinking. I don't know what I'm doing. You've been on the inside of one of these things.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm having flashbacks of when Elon called me for the first time. Keep doing what you're doing.
Wow.
And so that was, I'm very grateful to Elon for actually doing it, for Jim for having said that, and a handful of other people along the way who kind of said, I know you think you're crazy, but like, keep going.
Yeah. Well, we know that Elon had to put a lot of his own money on the line and almost lost it all. Did you ever have any similar kind of scenarios?
Sort of, except I didn't start out with much money.
Yeah.
I kind of put my life savings in Boom, but my life savings was like tiny compared to Elon's life savings.
Right.
So very quickly, I had to learn how to get other people to fund it. Because I remember getting to a point where it's like, I'm spending my family's like savings on this, and if I don't raise money soon, I'm spending the kids' college money.
Do you have any advice for people who want to do something as big, as you're doing, on how they can sort of make that transition or get help?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. One is, I found it very helpful to go after the biggest, most ambitious thing I can get my head around. And because easier or harder really is easier. And the other is there's no, people ask me like, how do you get credibility to space you never had any domain experience in? And there's no excuse other than just doing the work.
Yeah. There's
no shortcut. Like, how was I credible? I learned enough that I made sense.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where it was hard to ask me a question I didn't know the answer to. So you have to do the work. You have to actually get credible, and then ask for help. I'd cold email people, and with very few exceptions, people said, "I want to talk to you and see if I can help."
Wow.
And when I would say to people, "I'm building a supersonic jet," the first question everybody had was, "Are you fucking nuts?"
Yeah.
And they didn't always say that out loud, right?
Yeah.
But I could tell from their body language that was the question. It was like, is this guy from the loony bin?
Yeah.
But if I could convince them that like, maybe no.
Yeah.
Then the second question was, how do I help? Because everyone wanted to see it work.
Wow.
And so I got to the point where just like some of the most amazing people in the world would write me emails when they thought I was making a big mistake and they just wanted to help and stop it.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the other thing that happens when you pick a big, inspiring mission. I mean, for me, I optimized for myself. Like, I wanted to have a supersonic jet. I wanted to fly with my family, to Hong Kong or wherever else in half the time. But it turns out other people did too, and so they want to be part of it. They want to help, and I felt a little bit like some, just really amazing people were sort of conspiring and trying to find a way to make the whole effort successful.
That's awesome. I'm so glad it's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no guarantee that we'll succeed. There's still a lot of, one of the things I've learned along the way is we have at least one near-death experience every year. Like there have been a number of times where we've gotten the startup equivalent of a stage 4 cancer diagnosis.
Oh my gosh.
And, we look at it, we say, well, that could be it.
Yeah.
Or we could fight it.
Yep.
And, there are times where we had the startup equivalent of some chemo. But this is another reason why I think it's so important to pick missions that we love.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, startup life isn't worth living, and you accept the cancer diagnosis. Because if you don't, if you're sane and you don't love it, you'll give up.
Right.
And it's not, that's not supersonic flight or rockets for everybody, but I think all of us have that in us, and it's something different. You're telling me the story of like you quit the news anchoring thing and you cover space, right? Like that took courage, right?
Yeah.
And I think I always imagine like going back to like my 5-year-old self,
Yeah.
And talking to that little kid and saying, "Hey Blake, when you grow up, you're going to get to do X." And if you've gone back to my 5-year-old self, who was like sketching airplanes on napkins.
Oh my gosh.
Silly, stupid airplanes that didn't make any sense, right? Because I was 5. If you'd said, Blake, one day you're going to get to build a supersonic jet, I would have not believed you. I'd have been like, no way. Wow. No way, I get to do that? Holy shit, that's so cool. I get to live that life? And I think all of us have that 5-year-old inside us.
Yeah.
And so, like what would make your 5-year-old self just go, no way. That's so cool.
That's the thing.
And then go do that.
Yep. I feel like I meet so many people, like the majority of people aren't doing that with their lives. They have these dreams and they just don't, they're too afraid, or it's not stable enough, or it's too risky, and it's really sad. It
is. I think we get taught all the wrong things about this. Like my mom told me, hi Mom, when I said, Mom, I want to work on supersonic flight, she said, Blake, shouldn't you work on something you know something about? Yeah. And that is, it is such standard advice, and it's terrible advice. It's terrible advice.
Yeah.
Because, especially I think the older we get, the better we get at learning. And, especially if you're going to go be a startup founder, but I think this applies to just about anybody. But if you're going to be a startup founder, the day you take your company public, 99% of what you have to know that day, you didn't know the day you started. You're going to learn, right?
For sure.
So why not go to 99.5% and work on the thing you love
that
you're going to get to learn about? And the other thing is risk is upside down.
Yeah.
Like people say, Blake, you've got such an appetite for risk. Really? To me, the big risk is being 80, looking back on my life and wondering why didn't I go for it?
Yeah.
That's the risk I don't want to take. By the way, if I screw this up, I'll find a job.
Yeah.
Right?
There's always a fallback.
I think it's easy to think there isn't a fallback.
Yeah.
But I think there really, I think there is. I think smart people will, if you actually find yourself in that situation, you're going to find a way out.
Yeah.
And in fact, the more you put yourself into something really hard, the more capability you're going to build in yourself, and therefore the better your ability to go off and do something else later. Like
Totally.
when people talk about coming to Boom, and they're out of, let's say a big stable company, they say, I'm really worried about the risk. And what I say is you got to break the risk down, because there's job risk and there's career risk, and they're not the same thing. If you go to an early stage startup, you might actually have more job risk, because the company could run out of money, could blow up, the CEO could turn out to be an asshole, like all kinds of things could go wrong. And so you need to be prepared that you might change jobs. But I think there's actually less career risk, because when you go to a smaller, earlier company, you're a greater percentage of the company. And you get to have more impact, you get to learn more things. Usually there's way more work to be done than there was people to do it. So you don't have to ask for permission to do things, just find the most exciting thing in the company and go work on it. Everyone's gonna say thank you.
Yeah.
And then what you find is that you make career progress, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times faster than you would have being a cog in a big machine. So there is negative career risk going to a startup.
Yep.
You just have to be prepared to accept I might have to make a job change.
Right.
When I'm recruiting for Boom, we look for the top 5 or 10% of people who are self-starters, who love the mission, who are going to have perseverance and grit to get through the inevitable ups and downs and challenges. And something I say to anybody I interview is, imagine for a second. Now, this is not what we think is going to happen, but imagine for a second the company doesn't work. You have to be okay with that for you personally. Otherwise, you won't be in a position to give it all. You'll be too afraid. And so I went through that calculus for myself, and I ask everybody who comes to Boom to think it through as well.
Yeah, it's good advice. I mean, even with SpaceX and Starship, like, they're making progress, but it's still not a done deal. It takes time.
Yeah, I think they're going to crack it. But I'm definitely on Team SpaceX and cheering.
We both are, clearly. Are you ready for some lightning round questions?
Oh, let's do it, yes.
Okay, window or aisle seat?
I think it's a false alternative. I like airplane configurations where you don't have to choose.
Okay, nice. You've thought about this. What's your dream route for the first Boom passenger flight?
I mean, it'll be up to United or American, but my hope is they'll do something that Concorde couldn't have done.
Favorite airport in the world?
Doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
I have a lot of strong opinions about airports. I think we have good small airports.
Yeah.
I think we have only terrible large airports. And our airport architecture needs to be rethought.
All right. What is in your carry-on every time you fly?
My laptop, AirPods. I don't know, it's boring.
Same. Craziest idea you've ever pitched in a meeting?
Boom.
Fair. Favorite aviation movie or scene?
It's so obviously like Top Gun Maverick. And you know, I'm probably one of the few people for whom that movie is a tearjerker. But not in probably the way you'd think. Like that scene where he goes Mach 10, like that gets me because I'm like, I want to do that.
Yeah. Fast forward 10 years, what's the headline you hope people are reading about Boom Supersonic in 2035?
You know, my biggest wish, so when supersonic flights first come out, they're gonna be so exciting, right? And whenever I think when you go through Mach 1 on the airplane, you actually can't physically tell, you won't notice it, but you know, they'll get on the PA, they'll give everybody champagne, everyone will celebrate, there'll probably be applause, right? Because supersonic flight's gonna be a really special thing. And you know, the day I look forward to is the day where the passengers start saying, stop interrupting me. I wanna get back to my movie.
Yeah.
I wanna get back to my Starlink. I wanna get back to my, you know, email or book or whatever it is, because this isn't of course. You know, I want to make, when we've made supersonic flight boring, when we have to go teach kids that it didn't always exist.
Yep.
That's when we won.
So thanks so much to Blake Scholl for giving me his time in this interview and for showing us around Boom Supersonic headquarters in Colorado. I feel like there's a lot of parallels between what Boom Supersonic is doing and what SpaceX did to change the space industry forever. So I'm really looking forward to someday being a passenger on Overture because time is precious, and I love the idea of getting to see more of the world in less time. If you liked this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Again, this one was definitely a little out of the way for me, but I am so glad that I went and covered it because, well, Blake was a great interview, and I think it's really exciting what they're doing. So I know this isn't necessarily SpaceX rockets, but it's still a really cool thing that's happening, and I figured if you are a space fan, you might find this interesting. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.